Rain poured onto the stadium stage, drumming against the golden trophy in his hands. Cameras flashed, the crowd chanted, yet his eyes looked past the chaos, deep into the shadows of his past. He whispered, "I never thought I'd stand here," voice trembling under the weight of memory. This was not just victory. It was an act of defiance against every laugh, every dismissal, every slammed door. Somewhere in the front row, a banner with his brand's logo waved proudly. "Somewhere else?" rivals whispered, asking how the son of a broke taxi driver could conquer giants. But he knew the answer, because every drop of sweat, every scar, every sleepless night had led here. And under the rain, he wasn't just holding a trophy. He was holding proof. Long before the stage lights, there was the hum of an old taxi engine and the smell of worn leather. He sat in the passenger seat, watching his father navigate chaotic streets with practiced patience. "One day, you'll ride in something better than this," his father said, voice steady but tired. Outside, the city surged with noise and heat, but he wasn't dreaming of cars. His eyes were fixed on the thin soles of his sneakers, each step a reminder of how little they had. Every jolt of the road, every sigh from the driver's seat became fuel. The world saw a boy without a chance. He saw a blueprint for escape. The schoolyard was merciless. Whispers turned to laughter as eyes darted to his shoes, scuffed, dirt-stained, fraying at the edges. "Hand-me-downs," someone jeered. He didn't answer. He tightened the laces and ran. The ball came to him, and in those moments the noise vanished. There was only movement, speed, the rhythm of the game. Every pass, every shot was a silent rebuttal. When the game ended, his name was on everyone's lips, but as he walked home, the laughter returned, echoing in the corners of his mind. Nights belonged to his dreams. While others slept, he sat at a small desk, sketching sneakers in worn notebooks. Lines curved into shapes, shapes into visions. His father would sometimes peek in, shaking his head. "Dreams don't pay bills," he'd mutter softly, not unkindly. The boy didn't stop. The world outside measured worth in money and titles, but his worth was ink on paper. He didn't yet know how to build them, only that he must. One evening, the taxi coughed its last breath miles from home. The hood was open, steam curling into the night air. Father and son sat on the curb in silence, trucks roaring past. "This car's done," his father murmured. The boy's eyes stayed forward, steady, unshaken. That night he promised himself he would build something so strong, so unyielding, that nothing could ever leave them stranded again. The years rolled forward like the city streets under his father's tires. He grew taller, faster, sharper. His sketchbooks filled until stacks leaned against the wall, each page a step toward something unseen. He took part-time jobs, stocking shelves, sweeping floors, slipping sketches into his pockets during breaks. Every rejection from shoe factories felt like a dare. Friends drifted towards safe choices, but he kept chasing lines and patterns that only he seemed to understand. The nights grew longer, the silence deeper, but the vision never faded. He was still the boy in the taxi, only now with bigger hands, bigger dreams, and a fire that could no longer be ignored. He took his first real risk with a borrowed sewing machine. The room smelled of fabric and oil as he cut, stitched and unstitched until his fingers ached. There was no blueprint, only instinct. Friends stopped by, shaking their heads, telling him to get a real job. But when he slipped the first finished pair onto his feet, something shifted. They weren't perfect, seams uneven, soles mismatched, but they were his. In that moment, he realized he didn't need permission to build. He just needed to keep going. Finding materials became a game of survival. He bartered with tailors for leftover leather, dug through market stalls for unsold laces, and convinced a supplier to give him scraps others threw away. Every piece told a story, stitched together not just by thread, but by will. He wore his prototypes through the streets, testing every step on cracked sidewalks and wet alleys. People noticed. "Where'd you get those?" strangers asked. He only smiled, tucking the question away like currency. The breakthrough came in the form of a basketball game on a street court. A player twisted his ankle, his cheap sneakers splitting at the seam. Without thinking, he offered his prototype. The player moved like the ground had changed beneath him, faster, lighter, sharper. By the end of the game, half the court was asking where to get a pair. He walked home that night with a strange certainty in his chest. It wasn't just about shoes anymore. It was about giving people a way to move differently. Word spread faster than he could sew. Orders came from neighbors, then friends of neighbors, then strangers at bus stops. The sewing machine rattled late into the night, the air thick with dust and ambition. He worked until his hands burned, then worked more. His father stood in the doorway one evening, silent for a long moment, then said quietly, "Maybe dreams do pay bills." For the first time, the boy from the taxi allowed himself to believe it. Orders soon outgrew his hands. He found a tiny, dim workshop above a corner store, the air heavy with the scent of glue and leather. The floor shook when traffic passed outside, but it was his. He worked through the night, a single bulb lighting the dust in the air. Customers climbed the narrow stairs, leaving with brown paper bags and wide smiles. He hired one helper, then another. Every stitch carried the weight of his father's sacrifices and the laughter of those who doubted him. He knew this was only the beginning, but even beginnings can burn you alive if you're not ready. A local basketball team approached him with a request: custom shoes for their upcoming championship. It was a chance to prove himself beyond street corners and markets. He poured weeks into the design, blending comfort with an edge that screamed speed. The day he delivered them, the team captain laced up, took a few steps, then broke into a sprint across the court. "These are it," the captain said. And for the first time, his work was about to be tested under lights, sweat, and pressure. The game was electric. Every jump, every sprint, every pivot tested his work. The sneakers gripped the floor, moved with the players like an extension of their bodies. In the crowd, he watched silently, hands clasped tight. When the final buzzer sounded and the team lifted the trophy, the captain pointed into the stands. At him. The crowd erupted, and for a moment, he forgot the years of sweat and rejection. This was validation. This was proof his dream could breathe on its own. Success attracts attention, and not all of it is friendly. A well-known sportswear retailer offered to partner with him. The terms were poison: low pay, full control of his designs. "You'll never make it alone," the executive said. He smiled politely, but inside a stubborn flame roared. He turned them down. As the door closed behind him, he knew he'd made an enemy. But he also knew this: selling out now would mean killing the very thing he was building. The rejection set something in motion. Rumors began to spread. Suppliers cutting him off, whispers about his work being unstable. Orders slowed. Some friends advised compromise, others vanished altogether. Late one night, sitting in his empty workshop, he stared at a half-finished sneaker on the table. His reflection in the window looked older, harder. He realized this was the first real test, not of his skill, but of his will to keep going when the world wanted him gone. The slowdown was like watching paint dry on a wall you couldn't leave. Each day in the workshop felt heavier, the air thick with the smell of glue and unshipped sneakers. Bills stacked like bricks, forming an invisible wall closing in. Then came the spark, an email at midnight, its glow bright against the dark screen. A well-known international streetwear blogger wanted an interview, claiming they'd spotted his shoes at a local tournament. He read it 3 times, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Doubt whispered, was it genuine or just bait? But something deeper pushed him to say yes. The next day, he cleared the workbench, cleaned the dusty window, and prepared to tell his story. What he didn't know was that this interview would yank his brand from quiet obscurity into a storm louder than anything he'd faced. The article dropped at dawn, and by noon his inbox looked like a dam had burst. Orders from names and cities he'd never seen filled his screen. People asking for shipping quotes, custom colors, and bulk deals. His phone vibrated so often it slid across the desk. In the workshop he moved like a machine, boxing pairs while answering messages, handwriting thank you notes between sealing tape. His father leaned against the doorway, arms folded, eyebrows raised. "Looks like they found you," he said, and for the first time in months, laughter shook the room. But even as joy spread through the cramped space, a part of him braced for the other shoe to drop. Success, he knew, had teeth. Then came the call that felt like lightning. An agent representing a young rising athlete wanted to talk. They'd seen his shoes online and wanted him to sponsor the player for a televised championship event. It was risky. His production line was still small, his funds stretched thinner than thread, but the idea of seeing his sneakers under the glare of national cameras was too big to ignore. He poured his last savings into the deal. The day he met the athlete, the handshake felt like sealing a pact. "We'll win this together," the player said. He smiled, hiding the storm of pressure building in his chest. The night of the event, the stadium roared like a living thing. Millions watched on screens as the athlete stepped onto the court in his sneakers. Camera flashes burst like fireworks, and commentators spoke his brand name as if it had always belonged there. The game was fierce, each sprint, pivot, and leap broadcast in high definition, his design gripping the spotlight as tightly as it gripped the floor. Online, clips exploded across social media, hashtags forming faster than he could read them. In one night, his work was everywhere. But as the crowd celebrated, he felt a flicker of unease. Attention this bright could attract shadows just as quickly. He didn't have to wait long for the shadows. Days later, strangers began calling, offering faster production, promising cheaper materials, and dangling investments tied to suffocating contracts. One morning, a rival company unveiled a new sneaker design eerily close to his own. His anger was sharp, but his resolve sharper. Sitting in a dim meeting room across from two suited men pushing a contract toward him, he slid it back without a word. They exchanged smirks, but he wasn't there to please them. Leaving the building, he knew the fight had changed. This was no longer about building a product. It was about defending an idea. And he was ready. The first strike came not with headlines but with silence. Longtime suppliers, once eager to work with him, now claimed their schedules were full. He knew the truth. Competitors had shut doors before he could knock. But retreat was not in his blood. He sought out smaller workshops tucked into narrow alleyways, rooms that smelled of sawdust and dye, run by craftsmen hungry for a chance. "We don't have much," one old artisan told him, "but we have our hands." That was enough. Together they worked through nights, every stitch an act of resistance. His father's voice echoed in his mind. "You can't outrun the storm, but you can learn to walk through it." And walk he did, even when the road was uphill, and the rain unrelenting. The rival brand made its next move loud and public. Billboards loomed over intersections, mocking his designs with the word imitation plastered in bold red. His friends urged him to fight back, to speak out, but he kept silent. Instead, he buried himself in the workshop, sketching and cutting until his hands cramped. He built a new model, lighter, sharper, more agile than anything he'd made before. When he first laced them up, the fit felt like speed itself. "They can talk," he thought. "But they can't catch me." In the quiet of that moment, surrounded by scraps and sketches, he realized the fight wasn't in the noise, it was in the craft. The launch plan for the new shoe was bold, almost reckless. He organized an underground basketball tournament, streamed online, where every player wore his brand. The venue was an urban court under steel beams and floodlights, the air thick with the smell of rain on concrete. Crowds pressed against the chain-link fence, cheering with raw energy. The games were fast, physical, electric. Cameras captured every pivot, every jump, the sneakers gripping the slick court like claws. This wasn't just sport. It was proof that his designs could hold their ground in the fiercest arena. By the final match, the crowd was chanting his brand's name like a battle cry. By sunrise, clips from the tournament were everywhere. A slow-motion dunk in his sneakers was replayed millions of times. Orders surged, but so did the backlash. Rivals accused him of stealing designs, hiding behind fake companies, avoiding regulations. The noise grew until he called a press conference. Standing under the glare of cameras, he placed his sneaker on the podium. "I don't copy," he said, his voice sharp as glass. "I create." The room fell silent for a moment. Then the flashes began again, each burst of light capturing a man unafraid to stand alone in front of the world. The press conference became a turning point. Athletes reached out, eager to wear his shoes. Street kids posted videos of themselves sprinting and spinning in his designs, tagging him with messages of pride. His father, once cautious, now walked through the city in a pair, his stride a little taller. Yet he knew the fight wasn't over. Nike, Adidas, and his rivals were watching every move, waiting for a stumble. But the boy from the taxi had become a man who thrived under pressure. If they wanted a war, they would get one, and he would fight it not with fear, but with fire stitched into every pair of shoes he made. The giants moved with precision, unleashing campaigns that dwarfed anything he could match. Billboards in neon cities flashed, mocking imitations of his logo. Celebrity endorsements flooded every channel, their faces lit by budgets larger than his entire operation. Social feeds swarmed with trolls, their words meant to cut deeper than any blade. Inside his small studio, his team gathered, exhaustion and determination etched equally into their faces. "We launch anyway," he said, voice steady. The live stream wasn't just a product reveal, it was defiance made visible. Every second of rehearsal was deliberate, from camera angles to the way he'd lift the shoe into the light. On launch night, the key lights hummed, the air thick with focus. As the red live icon appeared, he looked into the lens, his voice calm but unshakable. "They can buy attention," he said, "but they can't buy authenticity." The live stream tore through borders like wildfire. Within minutes, orders from unfamiliar cities poured in: Seoul, Paris, Lagos, São Paulo. Influencers posted unboxing videos, their voices rising in excitement as they peeled back tissue paper to reveal his work. Athletes shared slow-motion clips of their first steps in the shoes, the soles gripping the court like they were built from the ground up for them alone. But amidst the noise came a blow that could shatter momentum. A cease and desist letter from a corporate legal powerhouse, its language cold and precise. The letter dripped with intimidation, warning him to stop production or face consequences he couldn't afford to fight in court. His lawyer urged caution, but something in him resisted the idea of retreat. This wasn't just about business now. It was about whether a small voice could stand in the same room as giants and still be heard. He chose confrontation over silence. The next morning, he recorded a video at his workbench, the letter laid out beside a finished sneaker. His voice was calm but laced with steel as he spoke directly to his customers. He told them what was happening, showed them the letter, and asked for their support, not out of pity, but because the fight was bigger than him. Within hours, the response became a tidal wave. Hashtags calling for justice trended worldwide. Customers flooded the rival's social channels, demanding they back down. Influencers reposted his video, adding their own voices to the cause. Days later, the letter was withdrawn. It wasn't just a legal victory, it was proof that his story belonged to the people as much as it did to him. The brand was no longer a single man's vision. It was a shared flag, carried by thousands. The storm cleared, but the horizon had changed. An unexpected offer came from a major sports distributor, one with reach across continents. The deal was bold. His sneakers would be sold in stores from Dubai to New York. It was a leap from cramped workshop to global shelves. The morning shipments left, trucks rolling in a convoy, each box printed with the logo he had once sketched in the margins of a school notebook. He stood on the loading dock with his father, the rumble of engines filling the air. "Feels different, doesn't it?" his father said. He nodded, not looking away from the trucks disappearing into the distance. This wasn't just distribution. It was his brand stepping into the world fully grown. But scaling up brought new challenges. International shipping meant navigating customs, currency exchanges, and deadlines that left no room for error. He spent nights at his desk with maps spread across the table, tracing routes, calculating risks, feeling the weight of each decision. Out the workshop's tall window, the city glittered under midnight's grip, towers lit like constellations. His reflection stared back at him in the glass, older now, sharper. This was no longer about survival, it was about legacy. What he built had to last beyond his hands, beyond his lifetime. And as long as he could stand, he would protect it. The awards night was awash in gold, a sea of light spilling over velvet drapes and polished wood. His name echoed through the vast hall, and for a brief heartbeat he stood still, letting it sink in. Cameras caught the gleam of the trophy in the presenter's hands, but all he saw was the shadow of an old taxi in his memory. He began to walk, each step measured, the applause swelling like waves crashing against a shore he had once thought unreachable. He glanced to the side. Industry titans stood in tailored suits, faces unreadable, some with forced smiles, some with quiet respect. For him, it wasn't about being in their company. It was about arriving here on his own terms, with no shortcuts, no compromises. As he neared the podium, the stage lights reflected off the polished trophy, and for a split second, he caught his own reflection in it, a man who had earned every inch of the ground beneath his feet. The podium felt warm under his hands, the microphone catching the low hum of the crowd, settling into silence. "Thank you," he began, voice calm, each word deliberate. He spoke of his team, those who stayed through long nights, through moments when orders seemed impossible, and the lights in the workshop flickered with the weight of unpaid bills. He thanked the customers who believed in a small, untested name, choosing authenticity over reputation. Then his voice softened, almost cracking. "My father, you gave me the first seat in your taxi, and the first belief that I could drive my own path." The hall rose to its feet. Cameras flashed like lightning. For a second, the applause felt like a tide pulling him upward, carrying not just him, but the memory of every dusty street, every scraped knee, every broken pair of shoes that brought him here. Backstage smelled faintly of dust and old curtains. Away from the roar of the hall, he found his father standing quietly by a steel support beam, his hands clasped in front of him. The older man's face was lined with years of driving through rainstorms, heat waves, and endless city nights. Now those same hands gripped his son's shoulders, holding him still, holding him close. Neither spoke. In the quiet, they both knew words would only dilute the moment. For a heartbeat, time bent. The hum of a taxi engine seemed to fill the air, headlights cutting through the night. They had reached the end of that long ride, and the destination was here. The morning sun poured through his kitchen window, casting stripes of light across the wooden table. He sat with a mug of coffee, the steam curling upward as he unfolded the newspaper. His photograph stared back, his hand raised, trophy gleaming. Headlines called him the man who beat the giants. Online articles replayed his speech, dissecting every line. His phone buzzed endlessly with messages, yet the world outside seemed calm. He smiled at the thought that somewhere, a stranger was lacing up his sneakers for the first time. It wasn't about the sale. It was about the feeling those shoes might give. Speed, confidence, freedom. That was the real victory. Years passed, and his brand grew to stand beside Nike and Adidas on global stages. Interviews came often, each one asking how he had done it. He never told them everything, not the long nights sewing by dim light, not the legal battles fought with trembling hands, not the times he almost gave up. Some stories, he felt, belonged to those who live them. Instead, he'd smile and say, "Some roads you don't find, you build." In distant cities, kids in worn sneakers would hear his words and pick up pencils, sketching designs that might one day carry their names. And somewhere deep inside, he knew his story was no longer just his. It was a spark passed on, waiting to light the next fire.